When I turned 68, I signed away the company that had been my life's work, trading 4 decades of sweat and sacrifice for $55 million wired into my account. To celebrate, I invited my only child and his wife to a restaurant so exclusive you had to whisper to be heard. The tablecloths were blindingly white, the silverware heavy, and the air carried that hushed reverence reserved for money and power. Before I tell you what happened next, what I did when I realized my only son had just tried to murder me, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe a legacy is earned, not just inherited, tap the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who understands that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Now, back to the night that changed everything. Across from me, my son, Elias, and his polished, ever-smiling wife, Grace, raised their glasses to toast my success. His smile was radiant, his praise perfectly measured, but beneath the glow of the crystal chandelier, I caught something else in his eyes: calculation. He thought I wasn't looking when he leaned ever so slightly over my glass. A small movement, a flick of his wrist, subtle enough for most to miss. But someone else didn't. A man in uniform watched from the corner. One quiet warning from him would unravel the glossy surface of that celebratory night and expose the rotting machinery beneath. What I didn't know then was that this night wouldn't just mark the end of my career. It would mark the beginning of my son's destruction. The restaurant was the kind of place that spoke in whispers and moved in glances. Every fork clink and wine pour was choreographed. Old money dined here, people whose names were stitched into libraries and whose scandals were covered in gold leaf. Elias and Grace fit right in. Too right. Their laughter was too easy, their compliments too slick. They called me a genius, a visionary. They said I'd built a legacy. But their words hit my ears like lines from a play, polished, rehearsed, soulless. They had practiced this. Maybe even in the car, mirror-checking their smiles, timing their jokes. 55 million, Dad? Elias said, shaking his head with a wonder he didn't feel. Can you even fathom that? He lifted his wineglass as if to salute a king. I didn't answer right away. My drink wasn't wine. It was cranberry juice, per doctor's orders after the last stress test. I took a sip and tasted something bitter, more than just the juice. I'd tasted this bitterness before, though I couldn't yet name it. Grace reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was cold, her smile softer than necessary. "We're just so proud of you, Martin," she said. And that's when it started to unravel. Her words hovered in the air like smoke, sweet on the surface, toxic underneath. "We're just so proud of you, Martin." There was something in her tone, something rehearsed, almost predatory. "Now you can finally relax," she added, giving Elias a quick, almost imperceptible glance. "Let us take care of you. Let us take care of you." The phrase slid across the table like a knife. I looked at my son, searching for the boy I once knew. I could still see him in flashes. The boy who rode shotgun in my first delivery van, clutching a toy airplane, asking endless questions. But that boy was gone. The man before me had a different look in his eyes now, cold, hard entitlement. My late wife, Clara, had seen it years ago. I remembered her standing by the window after one of Elias's many emergencies, her reflection framed in the glass, her voice quiet. "He doesn't see you as his father anymore," she'd whispered. "He sees you as a vault." I had dismissed it then. Love blinds us in ways logic never could. But sitting beneath the chandeliers that night, her warning echoed through me like a prophecy being fulfilled. The conversation drifted toward meaningless pleasantries. My health, their vacations, their new car. But beneath the words, something dark coiled. They spoke of a trip to Spain in the spring, a wine-tasting tour, and hinted at possibly buying a lakeside property, now that things are settled. I hadn't even touched the money yet. The ink on the sale documents was barely dry. But already Elias and Grace spoke as though it were theirs, spent in their minds, divided, possessed. I felt that old ache in my chest, not from the heart condition my doctor warned me about, but from disappointment. A deep, familiar throb that came every time I tried to believe in the man my son had become. I had hoped, foolishly maybe, that this night would be different. That the magnitude of what I had achieved might finally shift something in him. That I'd see pride, even gratitude. But instead I saw calculation. Hunger. I wasn't a father to them tonight. I was a key to a vault. After the main course, Elias rose from his chair and extended his hand to Grace. "They're playing our song," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Dance with me?" She giggled like a debutante and took his hand. They moved together in perfect rhythm toward the polished floor near the baby grand. From afar they looked like love. But I knew better. From across the room they looked like a magazine spread, Elegant, effortless, enviable. But the truth was far uglier, stitched beneath the surface like a hidden wound. I watched them sway to a classic ballad, one I used to dance to with Clara in the kitchen, barefoot and laughing, long before we had anything worth stealing. Their bodies moved in perfect time, but it was all an illusion. I had paid off Elias's gambling debts 3 times. I had co-signed on their oversized house, believing the lie that it was an investment in their future. I had fronted cash for their startup which never launched, never even had a website. Their entire life, down to the designer clothes they wore tonight, was mortgaged against my kindness. I turned back to my drink, the cranberry juice dark as blood in the glass. I didn't touch it. My doctor had been firm at my last appointment. "Your heart is strong, Martin," he said. "But it's not invincible. No more alcohol. No more risks." So I obeyed. It felt like a small price to pay for a few more years of clarity of life. I swirled the glass gently, watching the ice shift. That's when I saw him. And everything changed. He moved with quiet precision, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. The uniform was subtle, dark navy, silver trim, but the way he wore it made it clear he wasn't a doorman or a busser. He was security. High-end. Private. He stopped beside my table, posture straight, voice low enough that no one at the nearby tables could hear. "Mr. Reeves," he said, addressing me by the name no one used anymore. "I'm sorry to disturb your evening." I met his eyes. Gray, sharp and steady. Not the eyes of someone making a scene. The eyes of someone trying to prevent one. "I don't mean to alarm you," he continued, his voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. "But I saw something just now, and I believe you need to know." He glanced toward the dance floor. Elias was laughing, his hand on Grace's waist, whispering something in her ear. The guard leaned in closer. "I was standing near the bar," he said. "About 10 minutes ago your son walked back to the table. Thought no one was watching. I saw him pour something from a vial into your glass." The words hit harder than any punch. I didn't blink. I just listened. For a moment the world shrank into silence. The music faded, the low murmur of the restaurant vanished, even the clinking of silverware dissolved into nothing. All I could hear was my own pulse pounding in my ears. The man, his name tag read Reynolds, didn't flinch under my stare. His tone remained professional, but beneath it I caught something else. Concern. Real human concern. He wasn't lying. I could see it in the way his jaw tensed, the way he watched me brace myself. "I don't know what it was," Reynolds continued, "but I've been doing this a long time. Long enough to know the difference between a refill and a setup." I looked down at the glass still sitting in front of me. The cranberry juice, so ordinary, now glowed with a sinister undertone. A trap in a tumbler. Every instinct screamed at me to hurl it against the wall, to stand up and confront Elias, demand answers, make a scene. But I didn't. 40 years of negotiation, of high-stakes deals and boardroom betrayals, had taught me one lesson above all. Never react on emotion. Instead, I looked Reynolds in the eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Understood." He gave a subtle tip of his cap and disappeared into the shadows. And I began to see the truth I had spent years refusing to face. As Reynolds vanished into the quiet corners of the restaurant, I sat motionless, hands folded neatly on the white linen tablecloth. To any outsider, I probably looked like a man savoring the end of a fine meal. Inside my mind was a storm. It all began to fit together, like puzzle pieces I'd been too proud or too blind to connect. Elias's sudden interest in my will. The subtle pressure to consolidate assets. The frustration in his voice when I joked that I planned to outlive them all. It hadn't been impatience. It had been intent. He didn't just want the money. He wanted me gone. The realization was grotesque. A twisted knot formed in my chest, not fear, not even rage, just a terrible clarity. Across the room, Elias and Grace laughed as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just tried to murder me in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I looked down at the poisoned glass, then at my own reflection in the polished silverware. And I made a decision. I clutched my stomach and winced, letting out a quiet groan. Grace glanced over, concern lighting her face like a stage cue. "Martin," she called. "Are you all right?" The play was about to begin, and I was ready to give the performance of my life. I let my hand drift to my abdomen, fingers pressing gently as if probing for pain. My expression, strained, uncertain, was practiced, deliberate. I'd spent a lifetime reading faces and hiding my own. Grace was already on her feet, gliding across the floor in those heels she always wore like armor. Elias followed, a shadow behind her, masking concern with the awkward enthusiasm of someone playing the wrong part. "You don't look good," he said, crouching beside me. His hand touched my shoulder, warm and steady. Reassuring. Calculated. "Should we call an ambulance?" "No," I rasped, shaking my head slowly. "No need. I've had this before. It's just indigestion maybe. An old issue. I just need to lie down." "Let us drive you," Grace insisted, placing a hand on my back. "Absolutely not. I couldn't let them anywhere near me. Not now. Not ever again." "I've already called a car," I said, waving her off. "It's waiting outside." Elias looked almost disappointed, like an actor who missed his cue. I stood slowly, steadying myself on the table. My hand brushed the glass of cranberry juice. With an absent motion, I knocked it over. The red liquid spilled across the white tablecloth, dark and vivid, like blood. "Oh no," I murmured. "Clumsy me." They both moved at once, fussing over the spill, calling for a waiter. In the confusion, I grabbed the heavy cloth napkin that had soaked up most of the juice. It was damp, warm, and carried a sharp, medicinal scent beneath the cranberry. I folded it once, then again, and slipped it into the inner pocket of my coat. It wasn't just a napkin anymore. It was evidence. My only proof that the most unthinkable truth of my life was real. I didn't wait for further pleasantries or offers to help. I didn't want to see the concern on Elias's face morph into satisfaction once he thought I'd taken the bait. I turned and walked toward the exit, each step measured and unhurried, though my heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. Outside, the air was cool and clean, a relief from the suffocating opulence inside. The car I'd called was waiting at the curb, headlights glowing like distant beacons. 15 minutes later, I was in the back seat, the city slipping past in blurred ribbons of light. My hand stayed in my coat pocket, clutching the damp napkin. The scent of cranberry clung to my skin. It wasn't fear I felt anymore. It was something colder, sharper. Clarity. The car pulled away from the restaurant and into the bloodstream of the city. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. My fingers curled tighter around the napkin in my pocket, like it might vanish if I let go. I should have gone home. The streetlight near my driveway was glowing when we passed it. Warm, familiar. The windows of my house were lit, welcoming. But I couldn't go back. Not yet. Home was where Clara's ghost still lived. Her laughter in the halls. Her paintings on the walls. Her memory in every photo, every piece of furniture, every echo. And now all of it felt corrupted. To walk back into that space would be to give in to grief, and grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. I told the driver to head downtown. I needed sterility. Fluorescent lights. Clean white floors and the scent of antiseptic. I needed science, facts, something that didn't lie. There was a private lab I used to contract through the company, a place where wealthy people sent samples for drug tests and DNA results. Discreet, fast, no questions asked. I remembered the name. The address. The protocols. As the car rolled toward the sleepless core of the city, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to survive this. I was going to win it. The lab sat at the edge of the financial district, tucked between a luxury dental clinic and a private security firm. To anyone passing by, it looked like just another office, but I knew better. This was where people with too much money and too many secrets came to bury both. The lobby was quiet, brightly lit, and cold as a morgue. A young technician sat behind a pane of reinforced glass, the glow of his monitor casting blue shadows across his face. He looked up as I approached. I pulled the sealed plastic bag from my coat pocket and placed it into the drawer beneath the glass. The napkin was folded neatly inside, still damp. "I need a full toxicology screening," I said. My voice was flat, steady. The voice I used when closing deals worth millions. Everything. Organic, inorganic. Priority 1. He didn't flinch, just nodded. "It'll be expensive, sir. Money is not an issue." He slid a payment form toward me, eyes flicking to the name on my credit card. He didn't recognize it. "Perfect. Results in 3 to 4 hours," he said. "Encrypted. Where do you want them sent?" I wrote down a private email account. One no one else knew existed. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was building a war chest. The waiting area was sterile, white walls, plastic chairs, a humming vending machine no one used. I couldn't sit. I couldn't be still. I left and walked 2 blocks to an all-night diner that looked like it had been carved out of another decade. The linoleum floors were cracked, the jukebox in the corner broken, and the only other customer was a man asleep in his booth, coffee cooling beside him. Perfect. I slid into a seat by the window and ordered a coffee I didn't plan to drink. Outside, the city buzzed with late-night noise, sirens in the distance, headlights carving lines through puddled streets. I let the silence settle around me and thought. My first instinct had been the natural one: call the police. Report the crime. But I dismissed it before the idea had fully formed. If this went public, if the press got hold of it, the headlines would write themselves. Logistics tycoon poisoned by his son. Everything I'd built would be reduced to that. My name. My company. Clara's memory. It would all become fodder for gossip, true crime podcasts, and dinner party speculation. No. This couldn't be settled in a courtroom. This wasn't about law. It was about legacy. And legacies are not defended in public. They're defended in silence. I stared into the untouched cup of coffee, watching the steam curl and fade like ghosts I didn't have time to mourn. This wasn't a tragedy to be litigated. It was a cancer that had to be cut out with precision, not exposed with spectacle. Elias didn't just try to steal my money, he tried to write the end of my story. Quietly. Permanently. And I had almost let him. I thought of Clara again. Her warnings. Her sorrow when Elias borrowed money he never repaid. Her eyes when she said, "He's not like you, Martin." He never was. I had called it immaturity. Selfishness. He'll grow out of it, I told myself. He just needs direction. I was wrong. He hadn't just wandered off course. He had charted his own map, a path lined with lies and paved with entitlement. And now he had come to the end of that path, finding me in the way. What terrified me most wasn't the betrayal, it was the planning. The vial. The dosage. The timing. It meant this wasn't impulsive. It was premeditated. He had studied me. My health. My habits. He had waited for the perfect moment to turn a celebration into an execution. And then smiled at me as I lifted the glass. I didn't feel rage. Rage is hot, wild, consuming. What I felt was colder than that. It was the stillness of frost just before it cracks. My phone buzzed on the table, jolting me back. An email. Subject line. Case file number 874593, results enclosed. My heart thudded once, hard. I opened it. The attachment loaded slowly, the screen crawling line by line through medical jargon and chemical data. Then I saw it. Substance detected, metoprolol tartrate. Concentration, 2,500 milligrams per 100 milliliters. Clinical note, fatal dosage likely. My breath left me in one slow exhale. The report explained it in terms even a lawyer couldn't misinterpret. This beta blocker, meant to control high blood pressure, was present in a dose 25 times higher than the safe limit for someone with a cardiac condition like mine. It wouldn't have taken long. 45 minutes, maybe an hour. My symptoms would have mimicked a natural heart attack. No one would have questioned it. A quiet death. An easy inheritance. The son grieving. The will uncontested. It was, as the report coldly noted, the perfect murder. But the perfection failed. Because one man noticed. Because I didn't drink. And now I knew. Every last piece was falling into place. I closed the email and set my phone down with a quiet finality. A part of me had still been holding on to the slimmest possibility, that this was all a mistake. That maybe Elias hadn't known. That perhaps Grace had acted alone. That maybe, just maybe, my son hadn't truly meant to kill me. But science doesn't lie. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't desperation alone. This was strategy. Premeditation. Execution. He had researched my heart condition, obtained a pharmaceutical-grade dose of a drug tailored to it, and delivered it with a smile. Toasted to my health while waiting for my heart to fail. That tiny ember of hope, the one that said there could still be love left between us, died right there in that diner booth. I stared out the window, watching the sky bleed from black to gray. Dawn was coming. And so was the reckoning. I picked up my phone again and dialed the number I hadn't used in nearly a year. She answered after 2 rings, her voice sharp and clear even at this hour. "Walsh." "Cynthia," I said. "It's Martin. I need to see you. Now." No hesitation. No questions. Her response was immediate. "My office. 30 minutes." The line went dead. It was time to build a war room. Cynthia Walsh's office sat atop a steel and glass tower that overlooked the entire city. 40 floors up, it was quiet as the grave. Perfect considering what we were about to bury. I arrived just before sunrise. The building was empty, save for a single sleepy security guard who didn't even glance up as I passed. Cynthia had already given clearance for me to use the private elevator. When the doors opened, I stepped directly into her office. No reception, no middlemen. She stood by the window, coffee in hand, silhouetted against the first light creeping into the sky. Cynthia was in her late 40s, all edges and focus, with a mind that worked like a scalpel. I had known her since she was a girl. Her father, Daniel, had been my best friend, my partner in the early days of the company when we were just two men with a truck and a dream. After his death, she'd taken over his practice, and in time become something closer to family than even my own blood. "Martin," she said, turning to face me. Her eyes scanned me like a courtroom cross-examination. "You look like you've just come back from a battlefield." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. "The war," I said quietly, "is just beginning." I sat across from her at the broad mahogany table where deals had been made, secrets had been kept, and empires had been quietly defended. I didn't ease into the conversation. There was no time for that. I told her everything. From the forced smiles at dinner to the spilled cranberry juice. From the guard's quiet warning to the lab report that confirmed my death had been scripted to look natural. Her eyes never left mine as I spoke, but her fingers moved, taking notes, pulling files, thinking 5 steps ahead. When I finished, I slid my phone across the desk. The toxicology report still glowed on the screen. She read it in silence. Her expression never changed, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edges of the device. "That son of a bitch," she whispered, each word clipped and dangerous. "He finally did it." She stood and began to pace, a storm brewing in her sharp lawyer's mind. "First call is the district attorney," she said. "I'll wake him up myself. This is attempted murder. Premeditated. With that report and the guard's statement, it's an open and shut case." I raised a hand. "No." She stopped. "Martin, he tried to kill you." I nodded. "Exactly why prison isn't enough." Cynthia stared at me, her sharp mind parsing what I hadn't said yet. Her voice softened, but her intensity didn't fade. "What do you want then?" she asked. I leaned forward, every word deliberate. "I don't want justice, Cynthia. I want correction. Not a punishment he can adapt to. A demolition he can't rebuild from." She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She understood. "I want to take away the one thing Elias was willing to kill for, my legacy. I want him to wake up one day and realize the future he thought was guaranteed has vanished. No headlines. No courtroom. Just silence. Oblivion." Slowly, a smile touched the corner of her mouth. "Not joy. Strategy. This isn't prosecution," she murmured. "This is annihilation." She crossed to her laptop and began typing like a concert pianist. Measured, precise, relentless. "I know a firm," she said. "Ex-FBI, ex-IRS. Ghosts with licenses. They'll dig up everything, finances, friends, secrets. If your son and his wife have a crack in their world, we'll find it." "How soon?" I asked. "By sunrise," she replied without looking up. "And Martin?" "Yes. We won't just destroy the future he tried to steal. We'll bury the fantasy he was already living in." The plan was simple in theory, surgical in execution. While Cynthia's team hunted for every hidden debt, forged document, and unpaid sin, I would play the part Elias expected, the grateful aging father still too shaken from his health scare to think clearly. I would dangle the inheritance like bait, let them believe the trust was real, the money as good as theirs. I answered Elias's calls with practiced weariness. I let him think I needed him. That he was finally stepping into the role he'd always coveted, the heir apparent. All while the truth was quietly, meticulously being constructed behind the curtain. Within 10 days the investigation was complete. The evidence was devastating: millions in hidden debt, shady loans, even forged legal documents giving Elias access to my medical history months ago. They hadn't just planned to kill me. They had mapped out every step of it down to the dosage. On a slate-gray morning, we brought them to Cynthia's office for what they believed was the signing of the family trust. They arrived glowing, victorious, unaware. And by the time they left, stripped of every asset, disinherited, erased, they were ghosts of themselves. I lost a son, but I saved my legacy. And I honored Clara, not by clinging to what she left behind, but by turning it into something that would live forever.